1985, and I guess I just assumed that after that everybody got them. I guess.
No. I was able to get a computer sometime before I graduated, sometime between 90 and 92, maybe 91, sometime in 91, I was able to probably borrow one from CDC, one of those portable ones that looked like the size of a sewing machine.
The luggables.
Huge, like the size of a sewing machine.
Yeah,
I think I brought one of those home.
Okay.
And then you had dial-up internet.
Dial-up modems.
Modems, right. Because I put a second telephone line in my house so that I could dial up.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about all that.
I had
one of those
I
for a while.
could do that. But yeah, it was still.
And you managed to get your dissertation done under those circumstances. I mean,
under those circumstances, it worked out better. If I would go back to UNC, I would have a full week. See, David Savitz encouraged me, and part of 268 was to write a grant application. So we wrote the grant application, and then finished, the class, and then I submitted it to the March of Dimes, and I got funded. Well, naturally, I didn't get the money. It came to the university. Came to UNC. You got the money. But I was allowed to use it to help me with school. We were able to hire a student with the money. I was working on David Savitz's grant that he gotten through NIH. No, NIH. Can't remember who we got.
Which grant was this from?
With the environmental health, textile, pregnant women. We were gathering data. I became one of his.
Was this the PIN? It wasn't the PIN, was it?
No. It was before that. We were gathering data on pregnant women. I helped with getting the records from University Hospital, from Duke, and from some hospital in Burlington. It was a textile study. It was to look at environmental exposures in the textile industry and risk of a low birth rate, I believe, in preterm delivery. And he allowed other students to add on their questions, and so I added on a couple of questions, and
that was how you got your dissertation date.
That helped. Actually, that didn't turn out to be my dissertation, but it turned into a paper that I got published later.
Right.
But it allowed me to have some travel funds so I could get back to UNC, get a little bit of support to get back to UNC from Atlanta. And no hotels. I stayed at a friend's home who had a second bedroom and a computer, and she put Lori Elam Evans. Let me just tell
Oh, was she the person?
Lori Elam Evans. So yes, let me just say Lori Elam Evans. She came up to UNC after me and overlapped with me. I think she got there probably the year I left. I don't think we were there together. So she might have gotten there in 90. And then when I came back, and we hired her to be one of the data abstractors through the grant that I got.
I need to interview her.
You do. And so she allowed me to come and stay with her every 6 weeks and work on a dissertation that way. And then towards the end, when I was getting to a point where I was crazed, I wouldn't even stay with her. I remember staying in, what was that hotel on campus, Carolina Inn?
Yeah.
Because they were across the street from the computer center. And I remember my final week at the Carolina Inn, I just slapped the door, and I would just, I could bring my laptop then. I had a smaller laptop. And I would work. And I remember I wouldn't let the maids come in. And they, I had the do not disturb sign on. Early in the morning, I'd run downstairs and get something to eat, and then run back upstairs to my room. And I would just work, and then at night, I'd run across the street and get my printouts. And after like 2 days, the maids thought there was something weird going on in there. They insisted.
Well, there was.
There was, right, And I would just give them my towels and say, no, I don't want my bed changed. No, go away. Just leave me alone, would work on it. Yes, I was one of those crazy people that I had seen when I was a little girl. Right. So, and I had to go away. I had to do that someplace else. My kids couldn't cope with me. I would take my daughter to soccer practice and drop her off, and then go and work, and then go back and get her, and just was like, hurry up and get to be 16 where you can have a car so you can take yourself, because I'm busy trying to go to school. So I'm glad I got all that done by 92. And then in the meantime, around 91, 92, I started skiing. Downhill skiing was something I picked up in North Carolina. My kids got me into it. They did it with a church group, and I decided I liked it. And through the ski club, the Southern Snow Seekers, I met my husband, and Prince. And we got married in 94. And then in 96, I got an opportunity to go to Hawaii as the MCH epidemiologist. At the same time as his job, Bell South was downsizing, and he was in a position to retire. He wanted to go back to school anyway, and so that's what he did, and we went to Hawaii together, and he went back to school to work on his MBA, and then he took several jobs, and the next thing I know, his final job, he was in the health department, and he was into computers. I can't even tell you what his final job was, because it was above my comprehension, because he was into computer stuff. But I'm working for the MCH program, and he's working for the director of the health department, doing their bioinformatics stuff, talking with people that I've never even met. He just zoomed past me, but I exposed him to public health, and he did really well with it. But anyway, we went to Hawaii, and I became the MCH epidemiologist, and I'd say I got interested in ethnic disparities with that job. I've been looking at black-white differences at CDC. Get to Hawaii, now I have birth data that I can look at, and the birth data in Hawaii is so rich. There are so many different ethnic groups, and the birth certificate has always allowed a woman to declare her ethnicity. 18 different ethnic groups are allowed on the birth certificates in Hawaii. And so people are proud of the fact that they are Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, and they put that on their birth certificate. Mm-hmm. So I could look at the data to look at, started looking at infant mortality rates, and I looked at the rates for the Chinese, the Japanese, the Laotian, the Hawaiian, all the different groups. I looked at it back for 20 years, and I found some fascinating differences. Starting in 1980, as I recall, the infant mortality rates for Chinese women was higher than even for African American women. And the Chinese rate plummeted around 1988, I believe. And then by the time I started looking, in 96, I was looking at this. So around the early 90s, the Chinese infant mortality rate was like 3.5. It was the lowest. It was lower than white women. So I talked to some of my friends in the health department who were of Chinese ethnicity to find out what was going on, and learned about what was actually happening in Hawaii. And that back Chinese and Japanese immigrants came into Hawaii to work in the pineapple fields. And they were some of the first immigrants, very, very, very poor. And then when Tiananmen Square happened in China, educated immigrants started coming, just left China, and they came to Hawaii. And so the population changed. Mm-hmm. It was fascinating. So I was really interested in the differences. So although in the U.S. we were putting all populations of Asian descent into one bag, I found differences in China, in Hawaii, so that I could tease out and see that the rates of risk were higher for Filipino women. And it was around that time that we got a chance to apply for a Healthy Start grant. Now, Hawaii's infant mortality rate as a whole was not low enough, but I knew
not high enough, or
was not high enough. I'm sorry, was not high enough. But I knew that there were differences in the different populations. I knew there were differences on the different islands. I knew that the rates were higher on the Big Island than they were on Oahu, and that the rates in Kauai. And so I started looking at, well, what's going on? There was some serious economic problems on the Big Island. Sugar mills had closed on Maui. We were exporting, we as a country were exporting the growth of pineapples, Dole pineapple industry. They still have pineapples in Lanai, but nothing like before. It's much cheaper to can pineapples in Indonesia. And so the pineapples that are grown there now are exported to the mainland for your fresh pineapples. But the cannery closed before I got there in '96. And so I knew that the sugar mills were closing, and that was impacting the economy of certain islands. Domestic abuse rates were up in those areas. Different things were happening that were making some women in some subcultures higher risk on certain islands. And using that EPI data, we were able to get the Healthy Start grant for Hawaii, for specifically the ethnic groups that were at highest risk on the island where they had the highest problems, which was not Oahu. So it was that kind of ethnic interest in looking at what's going on that stayed with me for the 9 years that I was there. Now, unfortunately, in 2004, my husband was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And so in 2005, we made the decision to move back to Atlanta so we could be closer to his family, because we knew, what was going to happen. And by this time, he was already coming back to Atlanta with me 3 times a year to be seen by the Emory Neurology Clinic. So we moved back in 2005. CDC allowed me to come back to Division of Reproductive Health, and I got a chance to work with PRAMS as the PRAMS program manager.
And PRAMS is?
Pregnancy Risk Assessment Monitoring System. Best data about pregnancy in this country. Let me tell PRAMS. Absolutely wonderful survey data. They are meticulous about the way they collect, clean, and weight the data. It was a wonderful team of people. I knew that they had program managers who worked remotely in the field. I can't remember how many states now. I should tell you more about PRAMS. But anyway.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah. I became a PRAMS program manager, and I was able to work on the project. And as my husband got sicker, I was able to, because I'm working with states, working remotely, I could spend more time working from home. And I was able to keep my husband at home until he passed and could take care of him and still work full time because of the work that I was doing. And I finally, in 2008, January 2008, I decided I was being stretched too much. I had 28 years in with Commissioned Corps, trying to make it to 30, but I didn't think he was going to make it to 30, so I retired, and I made a good decision because he passed 6 months after I retired. And I took about 2 years off at that time in my brain, although I stayed a contractor with CDC, stayed involved with the MCH EPI program, but didn't do as much for 2 years. Then in 2010, we had H1N1 flu, and it seemed to be impacting the Native American pregnant women more than, or Native American population, more than other populations in the U.S. PRAMS wanted to collect more data on risk in Native American populations, and so they had a special funding opportunity and encouraged the states that had high populations of Native American women to apply for the supplemental funding so that we could try to find out why Native American women were at higher risk. And they needed somebody to help coordinate that effort. Part-time position, contract position, I applied and I got it. And it was like perfect work for 2 years. Got a chance to go to the Indian reservations in Wyoming, They weren't one of the sites that was funded, but I still got a chance to go to the Indian reservations there. We worked with New Mexico, Washington State, and Oregon. Learned a lot about Native American culture, and didn't get anything published about that time, but helped them out a lot. And Alaska didn't apply, but now I've had 3 different ethnic groups that I've had a chance to learn about. That contract ended in 2012, and then right about that time, I saw that Alaska was looking for an MCH epidemiologist. They had put out this call on the email. I still was connected to CDC email. I loved Alaska. I'd been there to visit, but their PRAMS project was one of the best in the country. And I knew Kathy Parham-Hester, who was the PRAMS coordinator then and still now. When I was in Hawaii and we were starting PRAMS, I was modeling our work after what Alaska had been doing. And it was like, wow, I could go work for Alaska. So I applied, and they were like, are you serious? This isn't a senior position. I said, I don't want a senior position. I just want to come out and help you out and work with PRAMS and maybe analyze some data. And I've been there. I don't want to be the SME, subject matter expert. I just want to come and work. And so I did. I promised them 2 years. I went out in the summer of 2013, drove from Atlanta.
Wow.
And the summer of 2015, I drove back. I gave them 2 years. I loved it. Might go back someday to work. But at that point in my life, I was missing my family and my grandkids too much, and would still maintain my house in Atlanta. But one paycheck went for my apartment. One of my state paychecks went for my apartment, and the second paycheck went to buy an airline ticket to fly me and my dog back to Atlanta. And so after 2 years of that, I said, okay, I need to go back home. And so I came back in 2015. Mm-hmm. And since then, what did I do in 2015? I started traveling. Also, the other thing I started doing in 2012 is ballroom dancing. And so in addition to skiing now, I'm a ballroom dancer, and I love doing that. Urban style ballroom dancing, and I'll go to conferences in Detroit and in Las Vegas, Augusta, or wherever they are, and do this ballroom dancing. The other thing that I did when I was traveling in 2011 was when the earthquake happened in Haiti. And I was on a cruise in Australia with a girlfriend and said, I need to get back. I need to do something. So I came back and decided to start volunteering through my church to make mission trips to Haiti, to work in one particular community in Jacmel. And I've been doing that, since 2011. Gone almost every year. In the years I haven't gone, my kids have gone. My kids are grown now. My son has gone a couple of times. Got 2 children that I sponsor there. But through that group, I heard of a seminar that happened in Atlanta this April with a collaborative that's wanting to improve the maternal health in Haiti. Now, I've been working in a community where I've not been exposed to maternal health issues. We've been working on construction issues, feeding and education of children, and mission work. They have a small health clinic, but I have not been exposed to anything health-wise. And so I went to this seminar, and I was appalled to find out what really is going on in Haiti and how women don't have access to health care when they're pregnant. They deliver, maybe not even with a midwife, and that the maternal mortality rate is so high and the infant mortality rate is so high, and that there's an organization called Midwives for Haiti, and that there's other groups who are working to train birth attendants down there. So at that meeting in April, at lunch, I'm sitting talking to a couple of nurse midwives. And I said, where did you get your training? And they said, you can do it online and you can get trained in your home community. I came home and I applied to Georgetown University. And so I'm now a student in Georgetown Women's Health Nurse Practitioner Program, certified nurse midwife. I just finished my first courses in pathophysiology, and next year this time I'll be doing my clinical, and I expect by 2020 that I'll be certified and I'll be able to go to Haiti several times a year and help with services, training the birth attendants, and do that in addition to my downhill skiing and my ballroom dancing.
And can I ask you about something that we haven't talked about before? You also have been involved in APHA leadership, haven't you?
Yeah, I forgot about that. How could I forget about that? Yes, that happened in 1998, because I was in Hawaii at the time. I was in Hawaii there, and I was asked to fill in. There was an election that year for, well, I had gotten involved in the epi section. I was a section counselor, and then a governing counselor, and then in '98 I ran for office on the board. It was a last minute decision. On the executive board. It was a last minute decision. Somebody had dropped out, and somebody who was on a nominating committee asked me if I would fill in, and it was with 3 weeks notice, and I said sure, and I got elected. And so then